The nugget hit the floor with a soft thud. 4 tiger cubs hit the floor after it. Norah barely caught her balance as the corridor turned into a tiny striped stampede. Rumble slid first and pinned the nugget like prey. Spark snatched it and sprinted. Latch climbed Norah's boot like her leg was a tree. Bit, the smallest, waited 1 heartbeat, then pounced and stole the nugget mid-tussle. They froze, chewing, ears angled up. Not because they feared her, but because they feared the station. Norah froze too, staring at the ceiling camera dome. On Station Kestrel, unauthorized animals became paperwork, then cages, then silence. A door hissed open behind her. The galley manager leaned out, eyes narrowed. "Tell me you didn't just feed them in the corridor." "I didn't," Norah said fast. Rumble swallowed loudly. The manager stared at the cubs, then sighed like his soul had clocked overtime. "You're going to get me audited." "They were hungry," Norah said. "They're always hungry," he muttered, then shoved a small paper tray into her hands. 5 minutes. "Get your little criminals out of my hallway." Norah blinked. "You're giving me more?" He looked away. "I'm not made of metal." Norah scooped Bit first. Bit growled around her mouthful. She lifted Latch off her boot. Latch clung harder. Offended, Rumble and Spark tried to sprint in opposite directions. Norah caught both by the scruff and carried the whole problem into maintenance bay C. She sealed the door. Silence. Only 4 tiny breaths and the quiet hum of machinery. Norah sat on the cold deck and opened the tray. Nuggets. Real. Warm. 6 pieces. 6 pieces for 4 cubs and a woman who hadn't eaten properly in too long. Norah broke them in half, then in half again. Tiny pieces. Fair pieces. She placed them on a clean lid and lifted her palm. Wait. Tails swayed like impatient flags. For a miracle they waited. Norah dropped her hand. Okay. They ate. Not frantic this time. Not like they expected the food to be stolen back. Rumble chewed slow and proud. Spark tried to steal from Bit anyway, because Spark was born greedy. Bit smacked him with a paw and kept eating. Latch ate and never stopped touching Norah. 1 paw always on her knee like an anchor. Bit pressed against Norah's thigh, warm and shaking as if she feared the floor might vanish. Norah watched them and felt the familiar ache rise. Not hunger, fear, because she couldn't keep hiding them in maintenance bays forever. She had found them 2 weeks ago in a dock crate marked, "Live Animal." The transport log said delayed. The crate said, "Do not open." The cubs inside said nothing at first. They only stared and breathed too fast. Their mother was gone. Their feeder was dry. Norah had opened the crate anyway. Now the cubs lived in her shadow. A soft chime sounded on her wristcom. Maintenance call. Dock 7. Cargo hold. Norah's stomach tightened. Dock 7 meant shipments. Shipments meant hungry eyes. Norah loaded the cubs into the carrier. "You're coming." They yelled like she'd insulted them. Dock 7 smelled like cold air and hot money. Crates lined the bay, and a fresh delivery sat in the center with a bright label. Galley supply, high value. Norah's eyes landed on a sealed container marked protein bites. Nuggets. A forklift operator waved at her. Control panels glitching. Door keeps desensing. Norah knelt at the panel and popped it open. Wires. Dust. A burnt smell. Behind her, the carrier shifted. A low, unhappy sound rumbled in Rumble's throat. Norah paused. Rumble almost never growled like that. Not playful. Not hungry. Warning. Norah glanced toward the bay entrance. Nothing obvious. But the cubs' ears were pinned forward, all 4 staring at the same shadowed corner where dock piping met a maintenance hatch. Norah whispered, "What do you hear?" Spark pressed his face to the mesh. It made a tiny, sharp chuff. Latch poured at the carrier latch like he wanted out. Norah's skin prickled. She didn't trust the station's cameras. She trusted cub instincts. She closed the panel quietly, then stood and walked like she belonged there. She moved the carrier behind a stack of empty pallets. Then she keyed her comm. "Alpha. Dock 7. Quiet check." A beat. Alpha's voice came back low. "Why?" Norah kept her eyes on the shadow. "My service animals are alerting. Something's off." Silence again. Then, "Hold position. Do not engage." Norah almost laughed at the last part. She didn't have a weapon. She had 4 babies with teeth. The maintenance hatch in the corner shifted. Not much. Just enough for someone who knew how to hide to slip a tool through. A thin cutter sparked. The hatch seal died with a soft pop. 3 figures slid out like smoke. Raiders, not station crew. Their suits mismatched, patched, painted with teeth marks and ugly symbols. Helmets dark. Movements quick. One of them pointed at the nugget crate. Norah's mouth went dry. The lead raider whispered, "Grab the bites fast." They weren't here to sabotage. They were here to steal food, and if caught, they would take a hostage to buy time. Norah's hand hovered over the carrier. The cubs trembled, not in fear, but in readiness. Norah whispered, "No." She wasn't letting anyone take the only thing keeping the station from tearing itself apart. The raiders moved toward the high-value crate. Norah stepped into the open like she belonged. "Dock is restricted," she said, voice flat. All 3 raiders snapped toward her. The lead tilted his helmet. "Maintenance." Norah held up her wristcom line. "Issue. You're in a sealed zone." The second raider lifted a weapon. "Not military. A scavenged shock pistol." Norah's blood turned to ice. "Back up," he said. Behind Norah, the carrier shifted. Rumble growled again, louder now. A small thunder in a small body. The raiders heard it. The lead's helmet turned. "What was that?" Norah lied. "Quick. Pressure vent." The lead took 1 step closer. Then Bit made a tiny sneeze. The lead froze. "Animals." Norah didn't answer. The shock pistol raised higher. "Open the bay doors," the lead ordered. "Now." Norah's mind raced. If she opened the doors, the raiders ran, and the station lost food. If she didn't, they would take her, or worse. Norah's fingers slid to the carrier latch. Alpha had said, "Do not engage." Alpha wasn't here yet. Norah was. The lead barked again. Norah popped the latch. 4 tiger cubs poured out like living fire. Rumble went straight for the lead's boot. Not biting deep, just clamping and holding. Spark pounced on the second raider's shin like it was a climbing wall. Latch latched onto a dangling strap and yanked hard. Bit darted between Norah's legs and planted herself in front of her like a tiny shield. Ears flat, eyes bright. The raiders cursed, stumbling, shocked by the sudden chaos. The shock pistol fired into the air. Sparks snapped off a beam. Norah's heart hammered. She didn't run. She used the one thing she did better than the raiders. She knew the station. Norah lunged to the control panel and slammed the emergency bulkhead button. A heavy door began to descend, cutting the dock bay in half. The lead raider tried to sprint for it. Rumble held his boot. The lead fell hard. Spark yowled loud as a siren, echoing through the bay. That was the point. Alpha arrived like a storm. 2 security officers behind him, weapons ready. "Down!" Alpha shouted. The raiders froze, pinned by a falling bulkhead on one side and security on the other. The lead snarled, shaking Rumble off his boot. "They are just animals." Alpha's eyes cut to Norah. "Status." Norah's voice shook, but her words were clean. "Raiders targeting food crates." Alpha nodded once. "Good call." The raiders tried to bolt. The bulkhead slammed shut. Trapped. Security moved in fast. The shock pistol clattered to the floor. The lead raider spat toward Norah. "You fed monsters." Norah lifted Bit into her arms and held her tight. "I fed cubs." Alpha cuffed the last raider and turned to Norah. His gaze dropped to the cubs. Rumble sat, chest heaving, proud. Spark tried to bite a loose zip tie like it had offended him. Latch refused to let go of the strap he'd stolen. Bit trembled against Norah's chest, then calmed when Norah stroked her head. Alpha exhaled slowly. "You realize what you just did?" Norah's throat burned. "I kept them from taking the food." Alpha's eyes narrowed, but not with anger. "You also released animals in a live threat." Norah lifted her chin. "They didn't attack to kill. They attacked to stop." Alpha stared at the cubs again. For small bodies, big hearts, a long beat. Then Alpha spoke. "Quiet. You're going to be questioned." Norah braced. Alpha added, "And then you're going to be backed." Norah blinked. "What?" Alpha looked away like the words tasted strange. "Because if those raiders got the nugget crate, the station would have eaten itself. You understand?" Norah's hands tightened around Bit. "Yes." Alpha nodded toward the cubs. "Get them contained." Norah whistled twice. "Core." They came. Not perfect. Not tidy. But they came. Rumble first, Spark last, because he had to win his argument with the floor. Norah loaded them into the carrier and followed Alpha to station control. The captain was waiting, face carved from stress. She didn't look at Norah first. She looked at the report Alpha handed over. Raiders attempted theft. Threat neutralized. Food supply secured. Her eyes lifted. How were they detected? Alpha spoke before Norah could. Service animals alerted. Norah called it in. Then she sealed the bay. The captain's gaze slid to the carrier. Her striped faces stared back. "Your cubs interfered with a security incident," she said flatly. Norah's stomach dropped. She forced the truth out. They didn't have to be weapons. They were noise, distraction, time. The captain stared like she was measuring her. Then she said, "Time is what saved the station." Norah's breath caught. The captain tapped a few keys. Upgrade the registration. Station service animals. Security support under Alpha's oversight. Norah's eyes burned. "Thank you." The captain's tone didn't soften, but something behind it did. "Don't make me regret it." Norah nodded fast. "You won't." When Norah left station control, the corridor felt different. Not because the station loved her, but because it had acknowledged her. Back at Maintenance Bay C, Norah cleaned tiny pores with a damp cloth. She checked for burns, for cuts, for shock. Rumble had a scuffed paw pad. Spark had a bruised shoulder. Latch had a stolen strap. He refused to surrender. It was fine, but she clung to Norah's sleeve like she needed to make sure Norah was still real. Norah whispered, "You were brave." Spark sneezed. Rumble yawned like bravery was a job he'd already mastered. The next day, the galley manager stopped Norah outside the line. He didn't speak at first. He shoved a sealed container into her hands. Norah blinked. "What's this?" He grunted. "Nuggets." Norah's throat tightened. "Because of last night," he looked away. "Because you didn't let them take our food." Then he added, quiet like it hurt him, "Because you gave those cubs a home instead of turning them into station ghosts." Norah couldn't trust her voice, so she nodded. That night, she carried the container to the observation window and sat on the floor. Stars spilled across the glass, cold and endless. She opened the container. The cubs approached and sat in a crooked line, tails flicking. Norah lifted her palm. Wait, they waited. Norah broke the nuggets into 4 equal piles. Then she added a 5th pile for herself. The cubs ate slow, safe, certain there would be more tomorrow. Norah ate too, not ashamed, not rushing, just breathing. Footsteps stopped behind her. Alpha stood there, hands in his pockets, watching from a distance. "You did good," he said. Norah glanced back. "I broke your rule. I engaged." Alpha's mouth tilted barely. "You didn't engage. You protected." Norah looked down at 4 striped backs, small bodies warm against the cold deck. "They came for nuggets," she whispered. Alpha nodded once. "And you gave them a home." Norah rested her hand on Bit's head and felt her purr rumble into her palm. Outside, the universe stayed hard. Inside, in a corner of the station that smelled like warm food and clean air, Norah finally believed something simple. Home wasn't a place you were assigned. Home was a place you defended and a place you shared. Please follow my channel for more videos. One click from you can change my life.